volunteer with an organization called Friends of Green Street Park. They're an all-volunteer run neighborhood organization working to revitalize a park in the city's poorest neighborhood. I volunteer with this organization because I like giving back. On a fundamental level, I don't think it's fair for the city to throw time and money and resources into parks in the richer area of town and not do anything with this park. No kid should go without a safe place to play with quality playground equipment simply because of their zip code or the neighborhood that they live in.
Hi. I am a teacher. I'm a speaker. I'm a retreat leader, and I'm a spiritual companion.
My name is Rian, and I am...
My name is Busho Lan, and I am...
So how did you think they were going to finish that last sentence? What identity do you think was about to follow their passion that they're pursuing, their mission they're building their lives around? Well, let's find out.
My name is Rian, and I am a secular humanist.
My name is Busho Lan, and I am a Soto Zen Buddhist monk.
It almost sounds like the setup for a good joke. A Muslim, an atheist, and a Buddhist walk into a church, right? Can I say that? Anyway, you see, these are people from other faiths and no faith. They don't follow Jesus, and yet I think they've got an awful lot to teach Jesus followers, you and me, about what discipleship looks like. Our reading for today centers on just such a person, a Roman centurion, and the story goes like this. So a beloved servant of this Roman centurion becomes sick. And well, the centurion had heard about Jesus, and so he sent some highly respected Jewish elders to Jesus for help. And an interesting note about the relationship between the elders and the centurion was that it was a good one, right? It wasn't antagonistic. They apparently got along so well that the centurion paid for their synagogue, right? I mean, can we get him to pay for this place? Well, these elders got to Jesus and they begin to beg Jesus to heal the servant. And Jesus had compassion, and so he begins to go back with the elders to the servant, but as they are on their way, they run into still more servants of the centurion who say to Jesus, speaking on behalf of the centurion, "Lord, don't trouble yourself by coming to my house. I'm not worthy to even meet you. Just say the word, and my servant will be healed." And just then Jesus turned to everyone present and commented, "I haven't seen faith like this anywhere, not even in Israel." Drop the mic. Did you hear that? What Jesus said? I haven't seen faith like this anywhere, not even in Israel. Friends, today I want to be maybe a bit provocative and say that perhaps there are some modern day centurions that can teach us a thing or two about how to follow Jesus. And no, I know that some of you are probably like, yeah, but in any case, my hope for today is that you will leave here with at least a few handles and practices that the centurion embodies in our story for today. Curiosity, humility, and faithfulness. Get curious. So the Romans, of which the centurion was one, well, they were pagans. They knew a lot about a lot of religions, and this particular centurion pagan was paying attention well enough during the course of his day, his life, to the faiths of the day to know about an obscure Jewish rabbi in Jesus. And at some point, he had to be standing around one day on his shift or whatever and say, "Hey, who is that guy?" And then beyond that, do some digging. And I wonder, when was the last time we got genuinely curious about another Christian denomination, let alone another religion? I think that one of the unfortunate byproducts of the last few hundred years of Christians living in an increasingly diverse religious landscape is that we've engaged in a bit of what I like to call curiosity abstinence. I'm not going to take this analogy too far, but I can remember that when I was a kid, it was almost a sign of pride in my youth group if you were able to avoid being defiled by the Catholics and their Pope or the Baptists that wanted to baptize you again or make you make a decision. Those are things we actually talked about, like legitimately. One other story that I always chuckle about is maybe 2 years ago. So my family was hanging out with another family on our street, and they had a boy about the same age as our older boy. And it was just before Halloween, and the kids were trying on their costumes. And I remember Emil was wearing his lab coat. And I don't know why, but he felt the need to declare, "I'm a scientist," to which the other boy responded, "I'm a Christian." Do you hear it? His family was actively suppressing and blocking access to faiths and information that might challenge his faith. Well, what about you? When was the last time you Googled the ideas of another faith? When was the last time you kept your mouth shut about the 4 spiritual laws long enough to hear something about the pillars of Islam or how evolution works? When was the last time you were curious? Like the centurion. Get humble. You know, one of the interesting twists that Christianity has taken in America, in particular, is that it's become deeply masculine. It isn't uncommon for me nowadays to see pictures of Jesus with rippling muscles pulling apart the cross or giving the devil a right hook. I think there's a whole songbook out there of Christian music that could pass for a slow jam introduction to a WWE SmackDown for Jesus. But then there's an ocean of Christ-splaining. It's like mansplaining, but for Jesus-y things in our culture. And if you don't know what mansplaining is, ask your wife. If you don't know what Christ-splaining is, just think of the last time a fellow Christian gave you a bemused, "isn't that sweet" kind of look when you disagreed or questioned some idea, and then explained why you're wrong. And it usually starts with something like, "well, actually," Christ-splaining. Now, this centurion was in charge of 100 soldiers, and yet he humbled himself before Jesus, who again at the time was just an obscure Jewish rabbi. This was pre-resurrection, but what does Jesus say about following him? That the centurion gets: take up your cross. If you want to gain your life, you must lose it. The centurion was doing that. He is practicing Christ-like humility, and friends, I think we got to do the same. Because humility in the Bible is a powerful concept. It means to empty oneself. And so this centurion, who has tons of power in society, he has position, he has rank, he lets go of all of it. He becomes just another person in need of help. He lets go of the rope of his power. And it's important for us because as Christians in America, we have more or less been the power players in culture since the beginning. We've decided who's gotten to be a person, who would be slaves, who could have babies, who could get married, who can be a boss at work, all kinds of things. And I know nowadays it doesn't always feel like we have power as Christians, but to many people out there it sure looks like we do. And so it's important that you know this power exists. And second, that we got to leave it at the door if we want to connect with people who don't share our faith, because so long as they feel as though we are just trying to get something for them or coerce them into being the way we want them to be, we won't be meeting, we won't be connecting. We'll be putting ourselves on a pedestal separate from them, unable to do what our mission as a congregation calls us to do, to connect. And so friends, we got to get humble. And finally, we got to get faithful. Now, there are some of you who are probably about to hit stop on this sermon because it sounds like a bunch of religious syncretism or some postmodern theological wishy-washiness on the truth. And I just want to say respectfully, see steps 1 and 2. But more seriously though, that couldn't be farther from the truth of where I'm going with this. You see, this Roman centurion, as I mentioned, was a pagan. And now, ordinarily today, when we use that term, we use it to mean something like an atheist or unbeliever. But 2,000 years ago, to be an actual atheist would have been next to impossible because everyone believed in a god, and especially pagans. And pagan people believed, oftentimes, in more than one god. earnestly. You see, the centurion says something that I think is easy to forget or to miss, but is monumentally important for us as followers of Jesus. You see, he tells his servants to tell Jesus, just to say the word. Think about that. Just say the word. That is what provokes Jesus to make the comment about the lack of faith in Israel. You see, the centurion believes earnestly that Jesus can heal his servant. In the same way, the people we met at the beginning of the sermon believe earnestly in their faith or philosophy. It is theirs. They're staking their lives on it. I wonder about us sometimes. You see, this story, I think, is so interesting because the Jewish leaders that the centurion had met go to Jesus begging, hoping, pleading for him to heal the servant, as if Jesus might not be able to or might not be willing to. The centurion doesn't do any of that. He just says, say the word. The reality, friends, is that we live in a culture that, in spite of our influence, is not predominantly Christian anymore. And yeah, I too have a lot of anxiety about that. But at the same time, I keep running into people like the ones we met at the top of this message, who have existed in this same space that we are entering forever, but who have maintained their faith. And it begs the question, why does the pluralism in our culture have to be so anxiety-producing for my faith? What if I took a lesson from these people and really truly believed, staked my life on nothing less, in my case, in our case, Jesus' love and righteousness? Well, friends, I think that if you do these three things, get curious, stay humble, get faithful, that you'll grow deeper in your faith and more connected in this world, well, than you've ever been. And isn't that what this church is all about? Connection. We're called to connect. And so, as we close today, I want you to think of someone you need to get some tea with this week. Someone you've kept at arm's length so that you can get curious and mix it up with them. And then I want you to think of someone that you have Christ explained to and maybe grab a coffee with them where you listen and don't talk. And then finally, I want you to show up here next week, ready to worship our risen Savior, Jesus, our cornerstone.